Hello, this is Scott Herbst. I am founder and president of Six Flex Training and Consulting, and you are listening to The Flex, a podcast where we have conversations with people who are expressing their leadership with the intention that it open up access to you expressing yours. I am really excited to introduce you today to Brittany Rader. Brittany is a board-certified behavior analyst and the president of clinical services at Behavioral Framework, and that's a company that is serving over 1,000 clients in the Eastern United States. As you will hear from Brittany, the company has really grown with her leadership, and she's grown along with it. I will let her share that story with you. Brittany, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just start with, will you share a bit with our listeners about your journey? I found it to be a really compelling story. How you got to Behavioral Framework and how you and the company have grown together.
Yeah, that's I love telling this story because it's pretty unique. And I'm very lucky that I landed in the position in the company that I'm in. So I started early. I've been in the field for about 15 years now. I've worked in almost every school district in the area. I've worked in private schools. I've done home-based, I've done clinic. And I found behavioral framework at a really pivotal moment in my career. I was not finding organizations that aligned with what I thought was quality care or had a strong mission. And I found behavioral framework, and I have been with them ever since. I started in the company. I was the first BCBA that was hired. And since then have advanced to clinical director, to vice president of clinical services, to now president of clinical services. So I was the original BCBA in the company at one. We now have over 100 BCBAs in the company now. So I've really been with the organization through every stage of growth.
Awesome. There's a lot we could talk about there. So one thing I want to point to is that, and this isn't an uncommon story, I think, that people work for organizations where the focus isn't necessarily on quality. And I seem to be hearing that more and more as, private equity becomes more of a thing in our field. It took something, though, to say, you know what, this doesn't work for me, and move somewhere else. Could you say a little bit about that and what led you to that place, and what it took to, to leave somewhere that wasn't working for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of overpromising. And I think that is part of the issue that I think BCBAs are finding in the field now, and lack of just a true business mindset. So, organizations will say, come on as a clinical director. You only need 1 or 2 years of experience. You've got XYZ potential. And that was the job I took right before I found behavioral framework. And I found myself doing everything but that. I was responsible for the growth of the organization. It was just me. And so nothing was matching on paper to what I was being told.
Yeah.
I don't think that there is a real secret sauce here. I think I just got incredibly lucky with finding the company that I found, which again, I think leads to our growth and success as a whole. Because the leaders of the organization, one was a behavior analyst, the other had a very strong business background, and they work really well together. And so we've got the business growth, and then we've got the clinical oversight and quality piece, and those things have just worked really well together. And I don't think that exists in a lot of organizations. You either have one or the other. And you've got BCBAs who are potentially looking to partner with private investors or, sell their companies and don't understand the business aspect and can sometimes make not so great choices.
Yeah. And you keep saying, you've said it a couple times now, that you got really lucky. I doubt that's true totally, because you also said you were BCBA number one. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really have been there, if not from the get-go, pretty close to it.
Yeah.
And so I imagine being there from the beginning, growing into, you're operating across 4 states now. You've had something to do with that growth. Can you say something about that and what it's been like to go from like a BCBA to now president of clinical services, and maybe a couple of the one or two of the key points that really required you to grow as a person and develop your leadership.
Yeah. I'm not one for buzzwords, but I think imposter syndrome is real, which is probably why you're hearing me say a lot of I got really lucky, and I don't want to take away from that. I don't want to water that down, because I do think I did, but it was a lot of work. It was a ton of work, and it was not easy, and it took a lot of experience in not being successful or not things not going as planned for me to really kind of identify what I needed for myself as a leader for this particular organization. And so I think, one of your questions was, how I kind of got there. And I think one of the things early on that was really helpful for me was, I was trying to define myself as one type of leader. So what type of leader am I? Am I do I want to hold all the power? And I realized, it took me a couple of years, but I realized that in order to be a successful leader and to lead a large team, you really have to be fluid in your leadership skills. You have to know when to balance between being a power holder and a teller to fostering autonomy and independence. And that changes day by day, week by week. It shifts with the organization. And so you had to get really good at reading the audience and reading the people that were reporting up to you. And it would be as simple as, my team is utterly confused. Okay, I've got to change my messaging. Or my team is now coming to me for everything. They feel like they can't make decisions on their own. I've got to foster some more, independence and critical thinking. So I think that was a big piece, is trying to like package yourself into a particular type of leader, when being a strong, effective leader requires you to be very fluid.
Yeah, I love that. I want to underline at least one thing that I heard, which is the observation that different situations call for like different ways of being, if
Mm-hmm.
you will.
Yep.
Sometimes there's to be really supportive, or maybe a little step back, and maybe in that case being supportive is actually stepping back and letting people figure it out on their own.
That's right.
You said being fluid. You also said you had to learn that. And I really love that, because I think that a lot of people look at leaders, and probably you've got people who come into your company, given where you are now, and you may not see this, but who you are and the way you operate occurs as like magical to them. And
Mm-hmm.
not magical, but like, oh, just Brittany naturally is this way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I love that you pointed to that you had to learn this. And I'm curious um, if there was anything that you did that you could offer people to say, this is how you learn it and this is how you practice it.
Yes. So a couple of years ago, I was just at a point where I could not get my head above water in my work.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out what it was. I mean, I knew things were busy, and that's just, it's part of being a leader, or, having a lot of responsibilities within an organization, but things just seemed unnecessarily hard. And what I realized was I was kind of creating my own bottleneck within my team, because I was really like trying to be this power holder. And some of it was ego. Like I've got the experience. I know how to tell you what to do or solve this problem. And I realized people just started kind of like trying to imitate what I was doing. But they didn't necessarily have the same context or the same experiences. And my way works for me, but it doesn't work the same way for other people. And so that's when I had to take a step back and say, whoa, like I am trying to I have too much control over my team to a fault. And I'm creating my own issues. And so one of the things that I found really helpful, that I still do today, is just changing the way I talk to my team members. So instead of them coming to me with something and saying, well, here's what I would do, or have you thought of this?
Yeah.
You have to think about it, and I have to say, well, what do you think should happen? Or what would you do? Or what would be the best case scenario for you? And then if they start going down the wrong path, I try to redirect by saying, all right, let's talk about what are the biggest risks if you make this choice. And obviously, you've got to step in when it becomes a potential bad decision or liability, but that really helped. And that's when I saw my team starting to be more problem solvers, critical thinkers, coming to me with potential solutions. And that was one thing I think has been really helpful.
Yeah. I want to underline what I would say that you're doing is you went from telling to coaching
That's right.
and doing the problem solving yourself to actually creating a space where other people could uh, pull their head out of
Mm,
whatever they're dealing with. Because you also said that like leaders are busy. I actually think everyone's busy.
everyone's busy. You're right.
Everyone's
Yeah,
busy.
everybody's busy.
Seriously, like someone
Yep,
who plays video games all day is
that's
busy
right.
playing video games, and they have the experience like, oh my God, I've got so
Yep,
many games to play.
yep.
Um, what I love that you said is that it sounds like in addition to providing an environment just through the prompts, through conversation, where people could start to try new things and uh, come to their own conclusions, it sounds like your life got easier.
Significantly easier. And
Yeah, what do you
my
see
team
it?
got happier. My team got happier. It was like we created kind of this new culture of transparency and not being afraid to admit when they made mistakes because they knew that there were solutions to them. And just give like it was a boost of confidence for them that they needed. And that's when I saw just major moves across all of our teams. It was huge. It was a small change, but it had a huge impact.
Yeah. How was it for you making that shift?
It was hard. It was a
Yeah.
lot of like, as a behavior analyst, I had to like stop, take a couple deep breaths, think about what I was going to say next, avoid the urge or, accept being uncomfortable with this urge to be like, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do because your decision is wrong. It took a lot. It took a lot, but it's like I got here by learning that from somebody else. And so it's, I would do my team a disservice if I didn't give them kind of the same opportunities that help foster the same growth.
Yeah. What you're saying is so great. And why it's so great is because I know that one thing that stops people in leadership is they think they have an idea about what leaders know or just how they are or what makes up a great leader. And I'm just hearing in what you're sharing that there was a recognition that, oh, I'm doing these things that don't work. And you just dealt with what people deal with when they're learning new things, and that it is really uncomfortable. Any new skill you learn comes with just a certain amount of discomfort, even
Yep.
if it really works.
Yep.
Like I'm going to share my learning story. I used to play golf. I haven't played in a while, but there's the way that I hit a golf ball just naturally, and it feels very comfortable to me, but it's really ineffective. And I had a girlfriend who was taking golf lessons, and we went golfing together, and she just started giving me pointers. And what she told me to do felt so weird and
Mhm.
so awkward. But then when I went to hit the ball, it worked.
Yep.
And it sounds like that's kind of what you discovered in leadership is that um okay, yeah, this doesn't feel natural to me.
Yeah.
I've
That's
got
right.
to let go of something.
Yep.
But it was probably what distinguished you is just that willingness to actually feel those things
Yeah.
while trying something new.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, just because you're a leader doesn't mean that are the keeper of all of the information and that you don't have things to learn. And, that's hard too, like being humble and letting go of your ego and thinking you need to know everything as a leader. And some of that too is being comfortable with just telling your team, like, I don't know. And I think if you ask, people that I work with today, there's a lot of times, especially lately, where I'm just like, I have no idea. Like, don't know the answer to that, but let's figure it out. And that is just, it's really helpful because it also it makes people feel okay to feel that way too, and not get bogged down with being concerned that they don't know how to do their job or how to solve problems.
Awesome. I love it. The next question I want to ask is, because you've really developed a team and now you're developing people who are developing teams, right? Have you found anything, or do you have any insights about how you take what you've learned and then have the people who are now developing and finding their leadership discover some of those same things for themselves?
Yeah. It's not easy, especially as the teams grow and I myself kind of become further removed from like the actual mission of our company, which is high quality direct behavior analytics services. But I think that, constantly being the model of the behaviors that you want your team to engage in has a trickle down effect, because
Yeah.
then they do it and then the people that they oversee do it. The messaging is huge. The way you talk to your team really impacts how they talk to their team. And I see it. It's just so obvious of, if I'm frustrated and I'm having a bad week and I talk to my team and I am speaking in a more negative tone, I notice they start to do it too. And it does require a sense of being, super observant, which, is a benefit of being a behavior analyst. But I think between constantly upholding the behaviors that you want your managers to engage in, making sure that you're communicating in a way that you want your team to engage in, aside from all of the processes and things that we have outlined on paper of this is how you do XYZ. A lot of it does come down to how you are developing your team as leaders so that they can then go do the same thing with their team, and so on and so on and so on, all the way down to how we talk about our technicians. When we have our clinical supervisors here and we're talking about technicians, I will always say the technician's job is the hardest job. It's not my job. It's not your job. It's the technician's job. And so the BCBAs can quickly get frustrated with their technicians, and, it's really easy, but even that messaging of like, you can get mad, but like, they're the ones doing the really, really hard work. So that has also been helpful.
I want to, you've pointed to this a couple times, and I think this will be really useful for people, is that you pay attention to what the people around you are doing. And two things you said just now, you said that they start to pick up on what you do,
Mm.
but you also pointed to that as being educational for you in observing, oh, this is how they're acting, and this is a reflection of my leadership,
For
and
sure.
there's something to learn there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think I want people to take that away, that you can get a lot of feedback that maybe isn't that direct, someone saying, hey, here's how you're doing,
Yeah.
from paying attention to what's going on around you.
That's right. Because as a leader, it's, you're not always leading the positive. You can be doing things that can make mistakes for your team as well. And so if you don't have that separate, feedback loop of like, it might be me. What are the odds? A leader is making a mistake. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to catch that with your team, and you're not going to be able to adjust, and you're going to miss huge opportunities to further grow a team.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question, I want to turn towards looking towards the future a little bit
Yeah.
and ask you what you're at work on now. What is your next challenge? Where are you looking to grow and develop, and your next initiative, whatever you want to share about that.
Yeah. I think, just within the organization, I think we are just, me specifically, focused on, scaling with quality. Um, there is, there's so many, the field right now is such a mixed bag. You've got different funder requirements, you've got RBT requirements. There's no real consistency, and it's a real challenge, but it doesn't mean that these kids with autism don't exist. And like, this number shocks me every day, but like in the DMV, I was told there are 30,000 kids that have a diagnosis of autism. And so it's, how do you meet the needs of the community against all of these requirements and constant funder battles while still maintaining high quality care? If we stayed small, if we, really narrowed down and waited for the perfect RBT, we would be missing opportunities to give kids this really life-changing treatment. And so that is it's a challenge, but it's something I'm really excited about, because it's something that we are constantly looking at every single day, is how do we meet the needs of the community and do it in a way that's actually impactful, not just targeting just the younger kids because they're not in school, or we really want to be able to get to as many people as we can. And so that's something that is on the horizon for us, is how do we grow? How do we increase access? But how do we maintain the integrity of our program? I think that's, it's a challenge because it's going to take learning along the way, but that's one thing on the horizon that is, constantly a work in progress.
I got one more question,
Yes.
at least, and we have time for it. You mentioned, well, forget what you mentioned. One thing that I hear from certain owners is that it's because I talk with owners and leaders in all different size companies. And one thing I see with owners of smaller companies is that they hit this place where they start to feel a little disconnected from the work and a little bit disconnected from the difference they make.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge for them, because what got them into it is what you're talking about, this real passion for making a difference.
Yeah.
And so I am curious if you have any insights that you could offer about, how do you stay connected to that and inspired and passionate while feeling that you're a little bit removed from the work now?
Yeah, I get why people say that. It's a hard feeling. Ironically, just this past week, I was like, you know what? I miss going into homes. I miss seeing kids. And the crazy thing, and you can ask my team, I'm not just saying this for the podcast, but I reached out to a group of BCBAs and I was like, hey, next time you guys are going into a home, let me, invite me to your calendar invite. And if I'm free, I would love to go with you. Because you have to stay connected. And it's true, like the further up you go, the more touch you do lose with the real work and why you are doing what you do. But there's other ways that we accommodate that. And some of it is just, when we're making changes or we need feedback on something that may or may not be working, it's reaching out to the people that are doing the job and doing working groups to get their feedback on, what do they like? What do they not like? Trialing things and getting feedback from the people that are doing it. We're in the middle of a huge software integration right now. And so that was part of the reason why I was interested in going into a home, was I wanted to see what the experience was like from the technician standpoint. And some of it is just taking the time to do that, because if you can't make major organizational changes in isolation, you have to know how it's going to impact the people that are actually doing the work. And so you've got to find ways to stay connected. So for us, it's, I think working groups is a huge one for us.
Beautiful. I have two more questions. We are gonna wrap up really soon, but before we do, is there anything that you were dying to share that you haven't had a chance to, that you'd like to let people know?
Oh man, I'm not good at that kind of stuff. Add that to my needs of
It
improvement.
is a yes or no question. If you say
No, I don't have no. We've
totally accept that.
We've covered a lot of ground. I feel like I have, yeah, no, nothing else I need to share.
That's fine. If people are curious about anything, how can they reach you?
My email is best, brittany.rader@behavioralframework.com. It's a long, long mouthful.
Brittany, Brittany, right?
That's right. Dot
Rader.
Mhm.
Yep.
At
Okay. And we'll include that in the show notes.
Sure. That sounds good.
Brittany, thank you so much for coming on and
You're so welcome.
being so willing to share about your journey and open up authentically. This is exactly what I am looking for and what our listeners are looking for. So thank you for sharing.
You are very welcome.
All right. Thank you, listeners, for being here, and we will see you on our next episode.